I had the training wheels on my bike for way too long. I grew up with a single mother who drove 2 hours each way to work, so like most Gen Xers, I was on my own a lot. One day I was riding my bike around the neighborhood, and a local neighbor asked me if I wanted him to remove the training wheels from my bike. I said yes, and he spent 2 minutes turning a wrench, and after that I was flying around the traffic circle, and I felt free, and it was a great feeling. I learned two important things that day: that sometimes you do need a helping hand, but after that, kind of the rest is up to you. And now as Gen X is approaching retirement, and a lot of the retirement options, say that the previous generation had, aren't there for us, and Gen X is going to have to get a little bit creative, I think, as we approach retirement. And I think exactly the things that defined our Gen X childhood are the things that are gonna help us as we approach retirement through some creative means. So the Gen X Latchkey Kid story, it's not a sad story, although some could easily think so. You know, the typical Gen X experience is the empty house, the key around our neck so we can let ourselves in after school, the making meals for ourselves, the parents not being around, and us kind of just raising ourselves and learning things as we go. And this created and a lot of independent people. So you may be thinking, okay, cool, so now what? Like, what does that mean? So as we approach retirement, a lot of the numbers, as you start to look at them, don't make sense. And you know, there's a lot of advice out on the internet of you need to maybe cut back on this or that, but I would argue that if you follow these three ideas, you'll be in a much better place. If you look at it currently, I believe the numbers are, for Gen X, the median retirement savings for a household are about $40,000, and as you start looking at some of the projections that you would need for retirement, you know, the numbers of 1 million, 1.5 million get thrown around quite frequently. And if you follow the typical advice for retirement, you know, max out the 401k, you know, and hope that the market kind of produces, that time in the market is better than timing the market, and that, you know, you just gotta hope that a 2008 style crash doesn't happen. But we also look at the state of Social Security. That's going to be a big part of Gen X retirements, and they're saying by 2033 that if nothing's done, that those benefits could be cut by about at least 20%. So as we start looking at the retirement numbers, like that gap starts to emerge. And I would argue that to close this gap, it's not really about earning more, but needing less. So let's dig into it. So for myself, I kind of have three different systems that I'm working on right now to help reduce that number that I need in retirement. And that's really a number that everyone needs to kind of calculate for themselves. You know, look at all of your expenses and your necessities, and how much do you need per month to survive. And then obviously you'll have to add on to that, but that survival number, it's your base number. And we all know that number that we come up with today, with the inflation being 3%, you know, that number is, it's kind of a happy path number. So for myself, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know, I sold my house in the city and moved out here to the country, and part of that was for some of these three reasons. So for myself, I wanted to be able to set up a solar system, one that was big enough to run most of my house and significantly reduce my electric bill. And what you see behind me is the inverter and the batteries. And I'll drop a clip of the solar panels in here. But for me, these have been able to cut my electric bill back by about 2/3. And then in the summer, once I switch a few more loads over, it'll pretty much can run my whole house, and I'll have a negative, I mean, basically a zero or very little electric bill. And the other thing is the water side of it. So I have a well out here. I have rainwater catchment. I've got filters, and the key is that I know how to repair these systems. I know how to work on them. So I'm not as reliant on the system of price increases and unforeseen costs or unforeseen outages. And for me, this has really helped out. And as I look 15, 20 years out, which the life of these systems can easily go 20 years, it significantly lowers that needs number that I have come up with. The other thing that's really worked out for us is fixing and remodeling houses. So the house we bought in the city, we bought it in a nice area, but it was significantly less than a lot of the houses in the area because it had pink toilets. It needed some work. Most people just want to move into a house and have it ready. They don't look at something with good bones and good structure and say, oh, I can get that done, because most of those people that are looking at that, they're seeing the cost that it would take to hire someone to come in and do that. And that's where I think the Gen Xers that usually have a lot of different life experience or the tenacity or the willpower to make things happen, I think this is a really untapped resource. So for ourselves, once we remodeled that house, and 5 years later, 6 years later, we were able to sell it and double our money while living in a really nice house for a while. And with that, we're able to pay off debt and then move out to the country and start setting up some of these systems. So I think for a lot of Gen Xers that might be behind in retirement, that might be a valid option to find a house that's a little less desirable, fix it up, and flip it, and kind of use that money to put it towards retirement and into your next step. The third leg that I talk about on this channel a lot is just financial literacy. So like you really have to understand how these financial markets work. You know, the typical 401k says you need to put in your money and let it sit there and let the market do the work, right? But there's definitely been times where it can take, you know, a decade or two to get back after a major correction. So for me, there's kind of a two-pronged thing where you have your typical 401k that you kind of have to contribute with the employer, but also being financially literate enough and following the markets, you can time some moves to increase your retirement nest egg a little bit quicker than it would in just a typical 401k. But the main point here is that working towards, you know, not getting rich but needing less can really help along the way. Let's talk about it some more. So for Gen X, I think there's quite a few of you that you might have a skill set that you're not using. You know, comfort happens. It happened to us, like when we first kind of stopped living paycheck to paycheck and we got a little bit of breathing room. You know, like we got comfortable. You know, maybe we we bought that boat or did some traveling and ate out a little bit more, and just kind of, after years of grinding, sit down and watch some Netflix and kind of just get comfortable and enjoy life. And that's really what the system kind of pushes. It doesn't want you out there grinding and improving yourself and kind of moving away from your reliance on that system. We're kind of told to abandon all of those things and skills that we learned in our childhood and just embrace the comfort. But I would maybe rally you to draw on that tenacity and the independence that you learned from being a child and a Gen X child. And I just want to bring it back to the kid on that bike. The training wheels that we inherited, go to college, put into your 401k, trust that Social Security is going to be there. Those are the training wheels that we inherited. I think we really need to shed those training wheels. And that's what this channel is really about. It's not a financial channel. It's not a DIY channel or a keto channel. It's all the things that it takes to kind of thrive in the current world that we live in. And I mentioned Gen X quite a bit, but this is for anybody that wants to take steps to kind of free themselves from the system a little bit. You can't completely separate from it, but once you know the rules and you give up a little of that comfort, there's a lot that you can accomplish. So if you're of that mindset, let's ride. Take care.